So I got asked the question, why was I sick in the first place? What drove me to have a disease that would compromise my life the way it did? And I wrote a list because, as some of you all know, I'm writing the book at the moment. And I've got a list of things that I believe contributed to the situation I found myself in. And I think sometimes by looking at potential causes of our illness, we can start to unravel what things we need to do to get out of it. So I've got a list. I'll quickly go through them and expand on them afterwards. So the first thing I put on the list was bottle fed, because I'm doing it in chronological order. From everything I've learned, there's no replacement for breast milk. It is perfectly made for a child. To have microwave bottles of formula is setting up a child for not the best gut health later in life. Obviously, I don't think it's something that will compromise you forever, but it's not a great start. It didn't cause my illness, but it's not a great start. Growing up, I was eating a lot of processed foods, especially when I got to choose the foods I wanted. I remember being maybe 9 or 10 years old, and all I ever wanted was the spinach pasta parcels with cheese on it. I just wanted cheese on everything. Just cheese and refined flours, pasta and cheese on toast. Just, my diet was heavily based upon refined flours and dairy products. That was the main calorie density that I got. I did eat some fruit from time to time, never really ate many vegetables. When you give a kid a choice, they're not going to go down that route, are they? They're going to go for the very rewarding foods. And I think that contributed to my problems. Didn't cause my illness, but it definitely contributed to it. You know, there was not little to no variety in my diet, and it was all based upon, like I said, pasta and cheese. I'd have porridge and yogurt, well, not the worst thing, in the mornings. And at school, every day, I'd have a slice of pizza, just filled with grease. I remember it now, that's just sobbing with grease. Worst kind of vegetable oils you can imagine. And a sponge cake with an Oasis, which is a sugary drink. It's just crap. Nothing to nourish yourself there. So, you know, I didn't feel great going into year 8 was a deciding year for me where things really went off a cliff. But it was around that time I developed acne, got self-conscious. It's no wonder I had acne with that diet. And I was going to the doctors, and they gave me 3-week prescriptions of tetracycline, which is an antibiotic. So if you think about it, I'm being given these long courses of tetracycline for acne, which is probably related to diet. I don't have an infection. It's like pouring bleach down into my intestines and into my body. And what am I doing when I'm having those antibiotics? I am eating utter shit at school. I'm having Diet Cokes all the time, which was a habit that I developed as I got into my teen years, thinking it was better. And just all this refined garbage, refined sugars, refined crap. So I'm destroying my good bacteria, whatever's left, and replacing it and feeding the bacteria with all this refined crap. Didn't cause my illness, but it was starting to take me down that path. The real turning point was when I went for a BCG vaccination. On my records for my patient access in the UK, it says that I had an MMR jab, but I cannot imagine it was an MMR jab. I'm sure it was a BCG jab. If you think about a vaccination, the premise is that you inject this with materials that sound the alarm for your immune system to attack whatever they want you to be vaccinated against. Who's to say that everyone reacts to these things differently? Who's to say that antibiotics don't have a factor in how you would react to a vaccination? All these questions, if you were to ask a GP or a doctor, they haven't got a clue. They don't know. They don't know the answers to these things. They just prescribe and do as they're told. So if most of your immune system is in your gut and you're taking antibiotics and you're really dampening your immune system, who's to say that when you take a vaccination, you're not going to react absolutely awfully? And that's what happened to me. I reacted horrifically to a vaccination. I remember within the hour, my arm went dead. I felt sick. I felt just anxious. And, up until this point, I wasn't somebody that was even thinking along the lines that anything doctors did was bad. I was taking antibiotics, doing as I was told, doing all the creams that you do. I wasn't thinking outside the box at this point. So I wasn't anxious because of the vaccination. And I remember just feeling so different. It was such a change I wasn't feeling great, but it took it to another level. And within 6 months, I was having the panic attacks and all these different things started to affect me. In that similar time frame, I had a tick bite. I'm not saying that I had Lyme's disease, but it was a possibility that played on my mind. Next up, I put in, during this time, I became very introverted. I didn't know how to vocalize how I felt. I never spoke to anyone. And I think this is really poisonous when someone internalizes everything, which is exactly what I did. I was feeling out of control of my life. I felt absolutely awful. No one told me that diet really mattered. My mum always used to say that what you eat is for enjoyment. You sure, enjoy your food, but nourish your body at the same time. But this was the premise that I had in my mind. So I felt awful. I was very self-conscious. I had acne all over my face. Every corridor and every room in our house had mirrors, so I was exposed to the floors all over my face all the time. I had acne so bad on my back. If you Google cystic acne, worst acne, whatever you want to do on somebody's back, I guarantee you mine was worse than any of those. I used to bleed all over my shirts, massive cysts and boils. My parents tried to take me on holiday, maybe the sun would help. And I went in the sea, came out, exploded in acne all over my back. To this day, I still don't know what that was about. It was just, I was beginning to feel like a sea creature. And I felt like the Elephant Man. I felt disgusting. I felt awful. I had rounds of antibiotics that I didn't need. When you have antibiotics, it does make you feel a bit shitty. But all these things were building up and building up and building up. And my introversion was increasing. My introversion on all my feelings and thoughts and everything was going so deep inside me that it was just eating myself up rather than being able to just express it like a normal person. And up until this point, I was fatigued, started getting joint pains, felt awful, was very depressed. But I didn't have like the ME fibromyalgia that later developed. So in this time, because it's so bizarre looking back now that I look at the person I was and it's like I was a mime or something. I just had it's like I had someone holding my lips. I just never spoke, never talked, never expressed how I was feeling. And I think that's a big part of what drove me down to illness, is because it was all being internalized. At the time, my parents were starting to go through a messy divorce, something that I've never really mentioned on this channel because I've not felt too comfortable expressing it, but my mum has paranoid schizophrenia. I lived with her alone for a long time, and my whole worldviews were based on the things she used to say. I didn't realise the extent of the problem. I didn't even think it was a problem. It was my norm. And all these things were building up. I turned to video games. I had addictions to anything internet related. I was, just turning to anything that was an addiction and a compulsion to try and override the feelings I had in my body. So I played competitive games because it would override anything I was feeling in my life. I would, look at porn because it instantly overrided how I was feeling. I would just feel anxious and just anything to escape my feelings. I had no cognition of what was happening to me. I had no answer. I just numbed it and tried to forget about it as much as I could. Not a good idea. And obviously when I developed those addictions, probably from the age of, to gaming, probably 12 onwards, it just got a lot more severe. I was looking at these screens up until bed. And obviously everything I speak about now is that these blue lights are absolutely decimating your quality of sleep. So I was staying up till the early hours of the morning, which is the key time to be asleep, to rejuvenate. And I was playing these video games, competitive video games, staying in the adrenaline state as much as I possibly could because it overrided everything that was happening in my life. So I'd go to sleep at, say, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then I ended up sleeping during the day and wake at night. I was looking at the screens up until bedtime, so my sleep was absolutely decimated. Then the family trauma happened. I wasn't fully aware of it at the time, but my parents got divorced. It was a overnight thing. I just so wasn't with it that when it came as a little bit of a shock. And I was left with my mum in the house, and I wasn't aware of the predicament I was in. And it became a real predicament because I was in a relationship. I'm not blaming her, but I was in a very abusive situation where I felt absolutely controlled, hopeless. I felt absolutely squashed as a person. I felt like I was nothing. It's something that I'll go into more detail in my book, but it decimated me to the ground, absolutely shattered my heart. And it decimated me. It really did. I just, after everything that happened, and then realizing that my whole worldview, everything I'd learned as growing up, everything was just one big giant fat lie, and my health was bad, and just all these realizations coming that I was literally going to have to build myself up from nothing. It just felt unbearable at the time. But that's when I had such severe symptoms where getting up the stairs would take my breath away. I had an episode of Bell's palsy because I was in such a stressful situation with my mum, and I was overweight, which looking back now, it's probably the start of the lupus kidney thing. The puffiness that I used to have in my face. And I was in pain with the fibro pains. I had POTS whenever I stood up. I was holding ice packs on my arms, and I'd just be there in my bedroom and just like, I have nothing, absolutely nothing to give. I have nothing anymore to fight. I have no fight. Even if I do have a little bit of fight, the idea of going back into normal life was just so out of the stratosphere that I didn't know where to begin, and it terrified me. So I would always go back to my addictions because just the idea of just being a normal person and being healthy and being happy and looking okay and being happy with myself, all these different things that felt so out of reach that just the idea of them would traumatize me back into my habits. And that's where I was when I was maybe 22. It was at its peak. 22, 23. I absolutely felt powerless. isolated myself from absolutely everyone, because even conversations with anyone was too draining for me. I just had I couldn't explain to anyone my situation or what I was going through. I had a lot of guilt attached to it. I didn't want to, talk about my mum in a negative way to absolutely anyone. She ended up getting sectioned, which I saw the police and everyone drag her out the house. I was left in the house on my own. I didn't fully understand the situation. I didn't believe she was ill still at the time. I think, looking back now, me not believing she was ill was like this comfort for me, knowing that there was some kind of like reality to hold on to. Like, we're in this reality that I don't want to go into it too much, but it was like, if I don't believe she's ill, like, I'm not consciously aware of this at the time. If I don't believe she's ill, that means that everything I'm thinking and feeling about at this time is like valid, or it has a purpose or anything. Because the alternative was, okay, I admit to myself that I'm a incredibly sick, isolated mute in a house with a schizophrenic mother, and my future looks very bleak. It's not something you want to accept when you're at the lowest point in your life. So I think that played an element of it. But I developed, like I said, the extreme acne got worse, all over my back, in my groin. It was awful. I just bleed all over my clothes. I just felt like a monster. I was completely dependent, obviously, on my mum as well. That's another factor to believe in it. So it got to a point where, I don't think I've mentioned everything, but another thing, my posture was awful. I was sat at a computer all the time. I know that posture plays a part. No exercise, didn't move. I had no energy to. All these things, just bombardment, boom, 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 constant degradation and what's the word? You evolve as a human being to move your body, and I was like degenerating so rapidly. My 85-year-old grandma had way more energy than I had, and more strength and everything. It was so just hard to take. I remember I had no idea what to do. I felt absolutely powerless. So I prayed. I remember it. I remember this one night in particular. She was screaming at me that I was working with the CIA. If I ever went out, I remember I took my dog like a 5-minute walk. It was instant bombardment of questions of where you been, who you been talking to, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, she was accusing me of being possessed, but it's a long story. And she was in my face, and she was saying all this, pointing in my face, and my heart shattered. I remember the feeling, and I remember feeling so hopeless, so powerless, so lonely, so alone in the world. I went back to my room. I remember I actually, that night, got pissed. I found diazepam in a drawer, took the whole trace, got pissed, listened to 9 Inch Nails, and I was just on the floor. I was just like, I don't give a fuck anymore. I really don't give a fuck. I don't care if I died today. I really just want whatever's happening to me to be over. Anyway, a few weeks later, I prayed and I said, look, God, whoever's listening, just give me something to work with. Anything, just give me something to work with. Because right now I feel trapped. I cannot get out of this situation. I physically cannot get out of this situation. I can't go and ask for help. I'm in such a state. I can't even communicate with people. I can't physically get out of this situation. So I remember I prayed, and I went to bed. And I think it was within 2 weeks, my mum had this idea that she needs to leave. She needs to just leave this place. She needs to go and get help for all these different things she used to speak about. And she just upped and left. It was within the same day, she was gone. And I was like, what? Is this the thing that I'm supposed to... Is this the lifeline that I'm being thrown, like, to get out of this situation? Because I really felt like that was it. If I didn't have a lifeline thrown to me, I don't know if I'd be in this situation as I am now. So I remember just going, shit, this might be it. This is, thanks God. Oh my, is this it? Well, even if it's not, I'm going to make the most of it today. Like, I'm going to, get rid of all my addictions. Just, I wasn't perfect, but I got rid of most of them. And, all the things that I've learned about over the last few days. What do I know is good for me? What do I know isn't going to harm me to get better? Right, this gaming at night's got to fucking stop. I need to get rid of gaming. I know that I'm in this anxious, stressy state. Even when I wasn't on the games, she was, when she was doing her thing and screaming and shouting. This anxious state is not good for me. I know that. So what do? Meditation. I need to go to bed really early. Also, the other thing I struggled with was insomnia. So I'll talk about that in another time. But I did all the habits. I knew they're not going to harm me. They're not going to make my recovery any worse. Get rid of all this processed sugar, processed food as much as I possibly could. It was a massive change. Just like overnight, I was like, I've got to make the most of this. If she comes back in 2 weeks, I need the little bit of strength to get out. So that's what I did. And she so happened to be away for 10 months. And by the time she came back, I was a different person. That was... By the time I was on YouTube, she was starting to come back. And by that time, I was well rested, felt good, started exercising. And I had strength. It wasn't that I had all this emotional strength. It was that my body wasn't absolutely trashed. So when she came back and she started pulling all that same shit that, I'm not blaming her. She's got an illness. But when she came back, I was like, no, I'm not giving this up. No way. I'm doing anything to stay in this space I'm in. So you do you, I'll do me. I'll put myself first, because if I had a child, I'd want them to put themselves first. You might not understand it, but I'm coming first. And what's good for me is what's going to happen. And that's how my story went. It might be a bit summarized, but that's my journey to illness and to recovery. Quite a long video. But I think it might help somebody out there. You can be in these situations where you just kind of flop over on the floor, stare at the ceiling and you go, I've got absolutely nothing. And you can come back from it. You just hang in there, and at some point, something's got to give, something's got to change. It can't be in the same situation forever. From my experience of my mum, I'm a very skeptical person of anything, understandably. I prayed that night. I wouldn't say I'm a religious person, but I prayed, and within 2 weeks I got thrown a lifeline. So it makes me wonder, yeah. But yeah, that's how I got sick. But yeah, no, I've been writing my book, writing everything that I want to put into it, and kind of distilling it. Because at first I was writing, I'm thinking it doesn't need to be this way. And my whole channel is all about simplicity, taking out the bullshit. what does healing really come down to? Dis-ease. Dis-ease with life, your relationships, your food choices, your career, all these things. What is causing you to feel uneasy with life? And obviously food is a massive part of it. If you're putting things in your mouth in a chronic way that just are making your insides uneasy, it's going to result in something that's not very good. But yeah, no, thanks for watching, guys.